Good morning. Thank you for, like he said, coming out on this blustery day. It's a little colder than we wanted out there with the breeze and heavy winds and whatnot. But what I want to do is open up with a prayer. I usually like to invite our Blessed Mother in. She's our symbol of purity. And we'll just start with a Hail Mary. So, it's a Hail Mary, full of grace. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thank you for being here on this. I know it's a difficult topic, something a lot of people don't want to talk about, they really stick their heads in the sand, I think, for the most part, but it's something that's really impacting our society in much bigger ways than we know, and hopefully by the end of today you'll know a little more about how it's being impacted. Don did a good job of introducing me, but in general, like I said, my name is Dan Onks. I'm the president and founder of Road to Purity. Our mission is awareness, recovery, and formation of what we do, and the talk today is basically hijacking a divine gift. It's how the porn culture impacts you, our society, and your families. We're going to reveal some truths about pornography that may shock you, as well as debunk some myths. I'll be taking questions at the end. Because of the sensitive topic, we have cards and pens around there and baskets and so forth. You can look for them and ask for them if somebody needs one. So you can write down your questions if there's something you want to ask that you don't want to ask in front of everybody else, just because of the topic. But we'll also ask questions, people can ask questions publicly as well at the end. We just want giving you that option. Many of you probably don't know me. They don't know why I do this work, and what it is that I specialize in and why I'm qualified. I'll give you a little bit of information on that. As Don said, I'm a certified addiction counselor. I've had over 3,000 hours of supervised clinical counseling, 250 hours of coursework in addiction, as well as an additional 50 in sex addiction itself. Over 5,000 hours of experience in counseling, coaching, training, consulting, teaching, all on porn and sex addiction. Like you said, I'll publish 7 books. We've been at over 4 years at St. John Vianney, working with seminarians to working with priests about chastity, pornography, sex addiction, educating them. Created and released a program called Restoring God's Foundation. It is the only fully Catholic program for sexual integrity recovery. It's endorsed by the church. It's got an imprimatur from Archbishop Aquila here. It's used in groups. We have group versions, online versions, communities, so forth. There's over 3,000 people that have gone through or are in this program currently. All of this looks good on paper. Anyone can add up a bunch of stats on a resume. But what's important today is to know that I am a recovering sex addict. I was addicted for over 30 years. I was addicted to pornography, massage parlors, prostitution, affairs, pretty much the whole gamut. I've been in recovery for about 14 years. Now, in my recovery, it involved counseling, groups, Sexaholics Anonymous, spiritual direction, education, and the Catholic faith. About 8 years ago, God said, you need to say something. You need to tell your story. I'll have a little more about that later, but that's a premise of what we're doing here. My sharing today involves education and experience. A lot of it is on my experience. I know because I've been there. I know firsthand the profound hopelessness, helplessness that an addict experiences. The devastation and destruction that causes families and those around them. The spiritual, physical, and emotional damage that it causes. Today I'm going to incorporate 2 of our mission phases of Road to Purity. First is awareness and the other is formation. The first part of awareness will have several parts in it of God's plan for sexuality, how this plan gets perverted, and how this perverted plan gets impacted into society and why. So first, we'll talk about God's plan for sexuality. We're going to talk a little bit about theology of the body. You may have heard it called TOB. Let me ask you guys first. Who here as a child had a sex talk with their parents? Anybody? Okay. Just a couple. Of those, which is a couple, did it involve talking about the essence of God and who we are in the image of God and how sexuality is revealed in God's plan? Anybody have that education when they were growing up at all? One? That's pretty typical. We grow up not having this information, not knowing who we are in God's image. So we're going to talk a little bit about it here. God is revealed in Scripture of who He is to begin with. 1 John chapter 4, God is love. Ephesians chapter 2, God is mercy. John 3:16, God sacrificed His Son. He's in sacrifice. God is love, mercy, and sacrifice. We are in His image in that way as well. But mostly we are in His image in the Holy Trinity, which is revealed. 3 parts, 1 person. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Man reflects this in Genesis, where one man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. This is man, woman, united under God as one flesh, 3 persons as one, image of the Holy Trinity. Now it's important to note that Genesis does not say we are made as male. It says we are made and female. It does not say that we are made as man and man or woman and woman or any mixture that we want. It's very specific of who we are in this identity. This man and woman in holy matrimony, in flesh, in a spiritual union with God, has that reflection. If any of you know who Christopher West is, he has made a statement that I quote. He's an expert on theology of the body. He's quoted as saying, "In the sanctity of marriage under God, sex is the wedding vows made flesh." In this divine union, if God wills it, a child, a third person, is created. Mother, father, child. Another reflection of the Holy Trinity. Marriage and family is the earthly image of God. The mechanics of this extension of life is sex. This extension, creating under God, expands God's kingdom as well. This is all part of who we are under God and how we fit within God and who He is. I say sex is the foundation of our existence. Christopher West goes as far as to say sex is the foundation of the universe. Without it, we don't exist. God has bestowed on His children this beautiful life co-creating gift of sex, which is supposed to be something beautiful that we have in this union with our spouses in co-creating life. He wants us to engage in it as it's designed. Okay? 1 Corinthians chapter 7. God encourages sex. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband, and the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Do not deprive each other except for a mutual consent of time. He wants us to engage in it, but within His plan. This is all a gift from God. We are giving of ourselves when we do this. It's clear basically in this picture that sex is not a bad thing. Society will tell us different. Nobody's here, okay? A handful of people are here. So being in this image of God, we are called to love, mercy, and sacrifice with our spouses. Marriage is a gift of self. We exhibit their transparency, vulnerability, and trust with our spouse, and they reciprocate the same thing. This is a complete emptying of self is what we are designed to do. 2 joined as one, as Scripture says. God even designed us biologically to desire and engage in sex. Our physical bodies, male and female, are designed to give and receive biologically. This is the way we're supposed to be. This is part of our essence and who our existence are as humans. Our biological chemical makeup comes along with during the sexual act. We have dopamine, oxytocin, testosterone, epinephrine, serotonin, vasopressin. This whole cocktail of naturally producing drugs to get flooded in our brains during this action. It's to create an addictive process with our spouses. We are supposed to be addicted to them and bond and enjoy them. This is all designed to make us want to engage, in sex with our spouses. Now consider all of this truth. And then the enemy comes in, perverts this life-creating gift that God has given us. Now, let's just for a short moment here, put ourselves in Satan's shoes. Let's see things from his eyes, okay? One, Satan hates God. We know that. He hates humans and the fact that we can co-create life with God. He can't. Satan will say, from his words, God calls these insignificant little pests his children. We're all his children, right? He will look at that as an infuriating statement. They're his children. Who am I? I've been cast out. Plus, they have the power to expand his kingdom. He's not happy. Satan is thinking, they need to go. They need to get out of here. I don't like them. They have power that I don't like. So now he thinks, how am I going to do this? There's this sex thing that he gave his children. Seems to be really enjoyable, and they seem to love it. And it's really the root of all the trouble. This is that thing that's just expanding his kingdom, and I don't like it. If I can pervert it, and I can turn it inside out, that just might work. That's what he's thinking. I'll tell them something that they don't need to do this according to God's plan. They can just enjoy this for themselves. They don't need him. This is just something to enjoy by themselves. It doesn't need to be part of this marital act, all this other nonsense. God just doesn't want you to have any fun. This is not what this is supposed to be. It doesn't have to be a man and a woman. It can be anybody you want. It's up to you, right? And just because God made you a man doesn't mean you have to be one. You can choose to be a woman if you want. You can do anything you want. It's all up to you. You have choice. And then it's for pleasure. You deserve it. Just go enjoy yourselves. Now let's give them some tools called birth control. You don't have to worry about these other babies coming about. And if you accidentally have one, we'll tell them that they can kill it, and that's fine, because it's not really a child. Doesn't all this sound familiar? Does it kind of sound like what's actually going on today? This is how we got here. That's part of his plan. So how does he accomplish this? This is what we need to be aware of that's happening right under our noses. Now basically, back to the beginning part, God created us to love and be loved. Period. That's how we are. That's who we are. We must have it. We are wired for it. If we don't have it, we will manufacture or we will accept any counterfeit forms of it. With that known, every last one of us is somehow wounded or broken as we grow up. Many ways, all of us have some level of these feelings of I am unworthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm unwanted, I need to be perfect to be loved. We all kind of have these feelings deep inside. These drive who we are and what we do. With this shame and not receiving perfect, authentic love that God created us for, we are in effect craving perfect love from imperfect beings, which are generally our parents, siblings, and other people that we encounter. This is who we have contact with. We're looking for this perfect love. We don't get this perfect love as a child, but we're wired for it. Most of the time, the reasons we don't get it are unintentional. It's not malicious. Occasionally there is abuse, that's severe trauma on a child, but they're all forms of trauma, just not getting what we are intended for. So we're desperate for this love. We're intended to do it ourselves and we learn and how to create that and engage with each other, but things have been so turned inside out, it doesn't happen properly. Therefore, we accept any counterfeit offered to us. Counterfeits such as food, drugs, alcohol, pornography, drive for success, possession of items, any of those kinds of things. By the way, these are all shame and identity aspects that we teach in this Restoring God's Foundation course that I mentioned to you. Now recall that God asks us to give of ourselves. We are a gift of self, sacrifice, giving to other people, the mercy. And then you bring Satan in his plan. He flips the whole thing on its head. Change one simple thing. Make it take instead of give. We are called to be a gift of self. Porn is a gift to self. It flips it completely backwards, inside out. So we're clear that Satan has just taken this whole idea and perverted it inside out, because he doesn't want us, he doesn't want God, he wants everything. So how is it impacting society? Where is this revealing itself? Let's start with kind of a brief recent history of how things have changed radically. Obviously sex, adultery, fornication, those kinds of things, though that's been around since the beginning of time. Porn as we know it today began to explode basically in Playboy in 1963. Sexual revolution came about in the 60s. High-speed internet was introduced into 2000s. 2007, Pornhub, which is the second largest porn site in the world, was developed. For a recent perspective on activity, consider 1951 on TV, the Lucille Ball show. Whenever you see a bedroom scene, like Lucy and Desi, whatever, they're fully clothed, feet on the floor, in separate twin beds. That's the extent that you would get in 1951. Now, just 60 years later, Kaiser Family Foundation, a research foundation, reports that there are an average of 143 incidents of sexual behavior on primetime network TV per week. Primetime. I'm not talking about cable. I'm talking about, or pay-per-view. I'm talking primetime TV. And 97% of these situations are with unmarried persons. In that 60 years, abortion has been legalized in the U.S. Abortion is accepted as and defended as a form of birth control. We are told babies are not created by God, but an inconvenient byproduct of our right to pleasure. Remember what he said? He said, well, you deserve this pleasure. Sex is not a gift, it's something to be taken. That's revealed by the fact that approximately 88% of all porn demonstrates physical or verbal aggression. That's what's out there. The one organization, Pornhub, that I was talking about, it represents an average, or reports an average of 120 to 160 million visitors daily worldwide. They're the second largest of approximately 1.3 million porn sites out there. If you just do a little math and extrapolate that and whatever, we come up with a very, very conservative estimate that there's somewhere between 400 and 500 million people looking a day. Anybody that thinks I'm the only one is not even close to true. That is one of the powers that have over us. We feel like we're the only one, and that's what I believed back early in my recovery, that nobody understood me. I got into a small group when I started in my recovery, and one of their protocols when they have new members come in is each of the members have a short little snippet of like 2 or 3 minutes about their own story. And I remember that first time sitting there holding back tears. I'm not the only one. These guys get me. That was impossible. That wasn't just something that was possible. I didn't realize that until that moment. And that was one of the things that started for me in the recovery, is realizing that we're not alone. Furthermore, God has been removed from schools and government. He's been prohibited to be part of sex education in schools. I don't know if you're up on what's being taught out there, but it is not from God. Sex education is not taught from God, even though it is procreation of His love and His gift, and the children resulting from it expands His kingdom. No, wait. Children are a byproduct of pleasure. I mean, how disordered and disruptive is that? I mean, all this we can see is really ugly presentation. It's not what we want, not what we want to see. But is it working? Is Satan being successful with this plan and this perversion of what God's plan and truth is? A couple of statistics. 67% of men will view porn weekly. 11 million teens view porn daily. Average age of first exposure is 9 years old. That is just, so many people will think, oh, my kid's 12 years old or 14. They're not looking at this. You're probably wrong. They're just good at hiding it. Now, there's a lot of these statistics that are out there. We read them, we read the stats. At Road to Purity, we went a little deeper. I don't know what these stats, I don't know how these stats were put together. I don't know who was interviewed. I don't know whether I don't know all the data. So we wanted to create our own controlled survey with real numbers. And it was a specific focused group. So we were at a conference called SEEK. It's put on by Focus, which is Fellowship of Catholic University Students, if any of you are familiar with that. They have a conference every year where there's approximately 10,000 or more college-age Catholic students at this conference. They're going to daily mass, they're going to adoration, they're going to talks on chastity and purity and all of the kinds of Catholic things. It's a phenomenal environment for Catholic young men and women, college age typically. We did a survey to just about 500 of them. It was anonymous. We had several questions that we asked, one of which says, do you feel that you struggle with inappropriate sexual behavior? And we went further and defined it as masturbation, pornography, hooking up, anonymous sex. That is inappropriate sexual behavior. In the survey, of these good Catholic students, 88% of the young men and 81% of the young women said yes, they struggle with inappropriate sexual behavior. Is that surprising? Those are the real numbers that we came up with in a controlled study, controlled survey, and these are cream of the crop kids. You know, going to Catholic events, going to Mass regularly. Porn is the biggest form of compromise of sexuality, and it is a counterfeit presented by the enemy. Even beyond statistics, we look at what does it do to us? How bad is just engaging it? You hear so many questions. So what's wrong with porn anyway? That's the question. We all know, well, it's a sin. So it's not from God. It's a bad thing. We go to hell for all the teachings. We need to go to confession and so forth. But it doesn't. It's just between me, right? It's just me and God. It doesn't hurt anybody else. Not true. It destroys human dignity. The behavior is the objectification of women. We see them as objects, not daughters of God. Part of what happens to this in the brain and in the chemical and the neural pathways of the brain is when you're involved in this and you begin to see and you want to take and you objectify these people to take for your own enjoyment, that begins to bleed to your everyday life. You begin to see other people in life. What can I get from this person? How can this person serve me? It creates a very narcissistic, selfish perspective and attitude. It trains the brain and the person to be that way, even if you're not. It also evidence of the destruction of a person's dignity. You hear all the time, the porn actresses, well, they chose to be that way, they chose to do that. There's so much coercion that's happening. They don't want to be there. They're lied to often. This is evidenced by the fact that porn actresses have the highest suicide rate of any profession in existence. Why would they do that if they chose it, if they enjoy that? According to several actresses that have been interviewed in different settings, nearly 100% of all the performers are addicted to something, whether it's pain meds, cocaine, heroin, alcohol. They can't live like they're addicted to something to get through what they're doing. It also destroys relationships. Misconception, couples will say, oh, we're going to live together, it'll help spice up our marriage. No, you create an objectification from each other, plus you're fueling all these other intricacies and problems. Talked about it creates a climate of selfishness and the narcissism. Human sex trafficking. Porn is a gigantic fuel of human sex trafficking. There's over 12 million sex trafficking victims worldwide. The Polaris Project, which is an anti-porn, anti-sex slavery organization, they have a hotline that people can call and report something they think looks like slavery and whatnot. They reported last year there were over 10,000 victims rescued from slavery from their hotline. That's 10,000 rescued from people that called and went through. How many are not noticed? We don't have any idea that's out there. Porn is highly addictive. It's addictive as cocaine and heroin. Dr. Donald Hilton, who's the American Board of Neurology has stated that porn is as addictive as heroin and cocaine. Can you imagine that? Just watching something, that you can create something by visual sense that's as addictive as one of these drugs. It's also progressive in nature, the way it grows. You need more and more and more of it because of the chemical reaction in the brain of the dopamine. Is more than I can get into right here, but it's progressive. You need more and more of it to get to the same level of enjoyment. It therefore becomes a dress rehearsal often for prostitution. And that's part of also with my story, as I said at the beginning, one of the things, prostitution was one of the things I was involved in. And I recalled there were times, I'm a Catholic convert, but there were times where I would research, look online, whatever, find somebody that I wanted to visit. On the way there, I would know that if I went through with this and I died before I made it to confession, I would go to hell. And I would do it anyway. I was playing Russian roulette with my soul. That's how hopeless and helpless this addiction can get. And that's not just a handful of people. The same Polaris Foundation that I had mentioned to you, their research reveals, and my own research supports this, that there are over 9,000 illicit massage parlors in the United States. You drive along, you see massage parlors alongside the street. There's over 200 in Denver. And I say illicit, I mean full service whorehouses. The whole thing. 9,000 in the country. There's just a supply and demand. They wouldn't be there if there wasn't a need. I mean, they're paying their rent. They're there for a long time until somebody shuts them down. There's customers. There's also there's also documented over 1 million prostitutes in the United States. Same thing, supply and demand. Nobody wakes up one morning who's never looked at porn, is not interested in any of that. They don't wake up one morning, guy wakes up and says, I think I'm going to go to a massage parlor and have sex. They don't go, there's a process to get there, and pornography is the link, the path. It does a lot of physical damage. Depression, isolation, anxiety, reduced IQ, ADHD symptoms. One of the things is that the average scene the person looks at while they're scrolling through is 18 seconds. You create an ADHD situation. One of the things that reveals itself is that in the last 15 years, I think it is, the diagnosis of ADHD has jumped by 50% in young people. I say a lot of that's attributed to what they're looking at on the internet. Now, there's a certain amount of it on YouTube and Instagram and all these kinds of things too as well. But this has happened before those other social media sites became real popular. Erectile dysfunction. There's such a thing as porn-induced erectile dysfunction. The physical action of the pleasure is different than the naturally created one by God. 1950, the average age of erectile dysfunction was 62. In 2018, it's 36. What happened? Look at the explosion of pornography during that time. That obviously had a huge impact on it. There's other situations too, but that had a huge impact on it. You look at all of the, you hear them on the radio, all these men's sexual health clinics pop up. You hear them all, there's like 3 or 4 of them in Denver. They're advertising constantly. They got customers. It's not everybody that's a senior. What's a big thing too is the reduced pleasure of day-to-day experiences. This is resulting of the dopamine and the flood. What happens a lot of times is the dopamine receptors shut down because dopamine is responsible for pleasure, enjoyment of things. Knowing anything such as food, being with friends, family, just the enjoyment, the dopamine boosts, and that takes part of pleasure centers. They get shut down. So one of the symptoms you'll see is, especially young people, teenagers and whatnot, if they begin to start isolating more and more, they're becoming more depressed, they're becoming more set back, they don't want to take part in anything, they don't enjoy anything in life anymore. Adults too, adult men particularly. This is what's happening more than likely, very often is what's happening. So the pornography is not as God designed, basically, is the point. So we look at general, across the board. What happens when we don't do things as God designed? We do what we want, our selfish behaviors. And we look at something to where aspects such as like eating, overeating, for example. If we eat for the mere purpose of pleasure, not for sustaining life and not to be healthy and whatnot, what happens? We get health problems, diabetes, joint problems, shortened lifespan. You may even lose your hair, or that's just me. But we look at things like even gymnasts. They have joint problems. They push their bodies beyond what they're designed. Football players, concussions, joint problems, a lot of other things. They push their bodies beyond what God has designed. It's a choice, sure, but it's what they do. We can be a little more radical and not doing as God designed. Take a look at, us men sitting here. We probably don't do the dishes that often. It's too much work, right? I know, that's what I think. I'm going to do the dishes, then we're going to dry them off. I got on the silverware. I'm not going to dry every spoon and fork and one at a time. No. I'm going to put it in the microwave to dry off. What happens? It blows up. You're not using it as designed, okay? It's our bodies. You don't use them as designed. We blow up. All of the side effects, all of the destruction, all of the dignity, all of the way we change our brain chemistry, it impacts us the same thing. You don't use something as God designed, there are problems. Why is this so popular? This is a mess. Why do people want this, right? Okay, well, I talked earlier about how we're all broken and we're all seeking this love and acceptance. And there's a shame that we all live with is something. Porn is a medication. It's an escape from parts of our existence and our lives that we don't like. Same thing as, people drink. Oh, I had a bad day at work, I'm going to go to the bar after and have a drink. You need to decompress, you need to escape. There's biological things that happen with that fuel that. Pornography does that in a huge way. but it's tied directly to something we're looking for. We talked about the proper design of God in a relationship with our spouses and what sex is supposed to be used for, the gift of self and the receiving, the vulnerability, the whole thing is beautiful. But too often we don't have that. But we're starving for it. Now, early in my recovery, there was another thing that happened. I was listening to another video was by Christopher West, and early on in the video, he gave this quote from G.K. Chesterton. It said, "Every man who stands at the doorstep of a brothel is looking for God." I've been at the doorstep of a brothel. I heard this. I was crying so hard I had to pause the CD. Something hit me. This is it. I had no idea why I couldn't stop what I was doing. This is it. This has been the problem. Now, it didn't solve anything, but it opened the door in understanding what the real problem is. Guys, pornography is not about pornography. It's about something deeper. It's about a root that's underneath a pain that we're trying to medicate, the same as any of these other drugs. Now we compare all of this stuff, disturbing stuff, to what God actually intended. We actually look at God's plan and see the perverted plan, of Satan. To circle back around to God's truth and design. You can think of the marital embrace as the way it's supposed to be from God. Men that are here, what we should be doing when we're with our wives, we say, "This is my body, which I'm giving for you." Doesn't that sound like something we hear on Sundays? The consecration? "This is my body, which I'm giving up for you." It's a sacrifice. Christ sacrificed himself for us, for our body, for our church. We give up and sacrifice ourselves for our wives. We empty ourselves to them. They are designed to receive us and then empty back. This is just all part of who we are designed. This is no more of part of the theology of the body, of the way it's supposed to be. I give to you, not take. How often do we, not intentionally, not even consciously, from a men's perspective, nobody raise your hand or anything, but just say, how often do you set, or you go, you're with your wife and say, "That is your body, which I'm taking for me." You don't know any different. You were taught that this is the way this works. But that's not the way it's designed to be. And I guarantee, men, you're thinking that yourself. All the women know it. You know that's what's happening. Maybe you don't understand why. Maybe you don't know that that's what's happening, but you know it. You know something's not the way it's supposed to be. Now, what do we do with this? A lot of unpleasant information, I know. But it's the truth of what's going out there that we need to see. Next, we talk about the formation. Next part of our ministry is about formation. We take this mess that we can all pretty much agree on, and if we didn't already agree, we know that it is now a problem. What do we do with this? How many here have school-age children or grandchildren? Okay. How many of them are in a public school? How about a private school or Catholic school? Okay. These schools, particularly the public ones, are creating more of a problem. And you probably hear a lot of this in the news, of what they're teaching and what they're denying God and so forth. So we're training the kids to begin with from preschool, essentially, and up. That we are not children of God, and this is not what sex is, and you don't have to be man or woman. You can't even use those pronouns anymore a lot of times. But unfortunately, even for the Catholic schools, they're expensive. If you got 3 or 4 kids in school, that's a mortgage payment sending them to Catholic school. So what are we supposed to do? We have to do the formation at home with that. And then what are the resources? What do we need to know? Now, I gave a lot of stats earlier of, the average first exposure is like 9 years old and so forth. Kids are growing up with this sexual immorality, what they watch on TV, what they see on social media, how they're interacting with friends, and what they're being taught in the public schools. And then even the adults are struggling. For all those, I'm sorry that you are, that this is happening. This is not what God wanted for you. He loves you and wants you free, and there is a way to do it. He wants you free from hurting yourself and hurting from those that you love. So what do? How do we form our children? How do we reform ourselves, our adult selves, especially if we've gotten astray, kind of like I did. I got pretty far off the rails, but unfortunately, as you see from the stats, I'm not alone either. First, our children. What do we say to them? One of the things that I asked earlier is how many people had a sex talk. Well, almost nobody had a sex talk. Probably didn't have any talk at all. What I recommend is you don't have a sex talk. It's something that needs to be talked about and discussed through their entire childhood. And if you got grandkids, same. Instill your kids to talk to their kids about this. If there's anything you talk about, it's a porn talk. That's the problem, today. The idea of sex is something that they need to learn theology of the body and understand who they are in God's image from the beginning. There's information, there's data, but there's resources out there. We have a handout on our table back there, a free resource guide for families and children, about families and children, of anything from adults to kids, of what to do, how to do this. There's a book out there from Monica Ashour, who is part of the Theology of the Body Institute, TOB for toddlers. You can start at like 3 years old. You're teaching them, this is my body. This is who God made me. God made me special. He has a plan for me. Boys and girls are different. 3 or 4-year-old can understand that, but you start making them understand, this is who I am in God's image. They begin to understand that as they grow. This Tobit, Theology of the Body Institute resource, they have a series of books starting from pre-K all the way through 8th grade. Very nice books that go through the process all the way through each year. So you have something like a couple times a year, you can have the discussion all the way through their childhood. And when they get to that age to where they're going to run into something they shouldn't see, they know it's something they shouldn't see. They've heard about it. They understand it. Pornography can easily be described to younger people as just something that shows where people show their private parts that you're not supposed to show. Simply, that's pornography. Then they know. Oh, that's what my mom and dad were talking about. You don't have to get graphic. You don't have to get, they'll run into stuff. Trust me, it's not. And all this process is not an if, it's a when. So they will run into it at some point. When you have older kids, teenagers and whatnot, and you're finding out that they've looked, or that they've seen it more than once maybe, one of the important things to try to do, it's difficult I know, is to not blow up. This is something that is very attractive, interesting, and because they haven't been formed up to that point, they're going to be very attracted to it and want to see it and want to continue. So it's something that you have to begin the education with, quickly. In that resource guide, there's a lot of theology of the body materials. Christopher West, that I talked about, has a whole theology of the body for teens program. You start at 12 years old or whatever. They can begin learning, who am I in God? If you yourself have not gone through theology of the body or looked through that material, I highly, highly suggest it. Christopher West has some incredible information. He has taken Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body and made it in plain English so we can understand it. It will change your life, understanding who we are in God and how this relates. And it's not just about sex, it's about who we are as men and women. One of the other things to look at is how you're working with the kids. One of the disturbing facts out there is this organization called BARC has research that shows the average, or the 53% of 6-year-olds have a cell phone. They've got a veritable red light district in their pocket. And their parents are doing it in the name of, well, I need to know where my kids are. I need to be able to go hold them in an emergency. Is that phone locked down? Probably not. What happens with this? Okay, this is something we got to think about when we're doing this. In the name of, with the public, physical safety out there, are we sacrificing their souls as a result? We really got to be careful on how we approach that and what we're doing. Also, another study: 90% of kids 12 to 17 don't think there's anything wrong with porn. Those are the ones our other kids are around. You think your kid's 12 years old, 13 years old, they don't look. I guarantee their friends are. Unless they're home in a bubble, they're going to run into it. And they need to be ready to know what they're seeing or what they're doing. Keep your Catholic faith growing with your kids. All too often, our own families, we go to church on Sundays and that's kind of what we do. The rest of our faith needs to be grown in general and with our kids. They can be a trigger to help us have a reason to grow. And we need to use that for their sake, but we learn a lot ourselves with all of this. For the guys here, if you're struggling yourself, or even women, if your wives, if your husbands are struggling and whatnot. Now, by the way, this has grown substantially as a women's problem as well, as I gave you the research, that study we did and what we have. One of the common things is, guys will just say, I'm going to have custody of the eyes. I need to have custody of the mind. I'm going to white knuckle it. I'm just not going to do it. What I say is they need to have custody of the heart. This is the root of it. This is the absence of what we're really looking for. The love, the doorstep of a brothel. We're looking for God. This is the real source of it. Just, I'm not going to look. I'm not going to think. That doesn't work very long. And any of the guys here know that it fail. Fail multiple times. You don't know why, but you do. Like I said, porn is a symptom of a deeper problem. We address the issues underneath is what needs to happen. And that's how the program we have, Restoring God's Foundation, is centered to do that. Because it's not a pray it away methodology. That typically doesn't work. People say, I need to pray harder. I need to spend more time in adoration. I need to go to more daily mass. All those things are great. They're all tools that are good for you, but they don't solve the problem. One of the ways kind of looking at it is when people say, well, God can do anything. He can just take it away if I pray enough. He could, but he won't. Think of this as a parent. Your child comes up to you. He's got a sliver in his finger. He's crying. He's got a sliver. Are you going to just give him some, children's Tylenol or some medication to take the pain away and leave the sliver there? Wouldn't it be kind of irresponsible? No, you're going to take the sliver out, right? That's the same thing. People say, just take my porn habit away. God says, no, I want to solve the reason you're looking at porn. I want to solve your pain, the need to forgive, the woundedness that you have. That's what I want to fix, and that's what you need to focus on. The porn is a byproduct. From what I've taught in my experience and what I have seen happen countless times, and I know this for a fact, if you eliminate the need to act out, the desire disappears on its own. This program, Restoring God's Foundation, that we have, I can't tell you how many guys have gone into that, started that process. I got into this to kind of get control of my porn habit. A couple of months into the program, this changed who I am. And my porn habit just went away on its own. That's what it needs to happen. But we can do that with ourselves and with this. We need to change our insides, what's going on, the woundedness, all these other images that we have. That's part of the program of what needs to happen. That's part of the action of what we need to do, for success. You can change this in your family and yourselves. We at Road to Purity have a lot of the resources for this, to do that. Prayer is paramount. Yes, it's guaranteed. You have to have it. But asking God to reveal what the underlying brokenness is and the resource for those wounds to help is where the prayers really should go. Adoration on a regular basis. Yes, ask Jesus to reveal your inner pain, how to heal it. Then just listen. Relationship with our blessed mother is a cornerstone. Mary is a symbol of purity. She's tough. Genesis shows that she crushes the head of the serpent. You don't get any tougher than that. But she will hold you as the mother that you never thought possible as well. Like I said, we have resources on the table in the back. There's several things. There's one pamphlet back there that's got several things on it. A pamphlet's a multiple-page little printout that has a couple of dozen different resources listed in it that you can get to. I'm almost done, but before I do, I wanted to let you know that I have a story I'm finishing with that I promised at the beginning to tell you a little more of why I'm doing this and how I got into it. There's a couple of things we have. We have at the table the resources that are free. We have some prayer cards. We have one of the first books I wrote, From One Addict to Another. It's my whole story. It's there. We have a purity rosary, which is designed for us exclusively for Road to Purity. The centerpiece of it has St. Michael with a sword slaying the serpent on a laptop computer. And that's the foundation of the rosary. I mean, it's great for praying for any of those who are in bondage of sexual sin, praying for victims of sex trafficking or sexual abuse, or any betrayal, sexual betrayal of those kinds, or for yourself. They're very nice rosaries. You've got samples up there for that you can look at. Also, just want to point out, Road to Purity is a nonprofit organization. We do materials, we have service, we have things nationwide out there. As Don mentioned, we serve over 800 parishes nationwide with our materials. Restoring God's Foundation is one of the cornerstones of what we have as a program. And we are also starting that program here, the small group in-person format of Restoring God's Foundation, starting here at Christ on the Mountain. Don has information about that if anybody wants to know. And we also have flyers in the back about it with his information that you can take. You can talk to him and ask about it. And at the same time, as a nonprofit, the majority of our funding is from donations and grants and so forth. And kind of as an added bonus, here during Lent, we have one of our great benefactors who is matching all donations. So all donations in whatever form are being doubled. Just to let you know that. One more other piece as well, before I share my final piece. You know my story. You know the unpleasantness of it. You know how, what a train wreck it must have been and what it was like for my family. Most people don't survive this. I mean, divorce rates over 55% now? By the pure grace of God, I am still married. This summer, we are on 35 years. My wife is here. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk to her after it, she's welcome for that too. Now, the last pieces I have, there's two pieces that contribute greatly to why I'm standing here, why I'm sharing these things about me that, only insane people would come up here and tell you about their sexual experiences and what they've done. But it's impactful. it needs to be said because nobody is hearing this and nobody's talking about it. One of the pieces is the scripture of where the parable with Jesus said there's a master who has two servants and forgave each of them. One he forgave a few days' wages, and the other one he forgave like 100 days' wages. I feel I've been forgiven 1,000,000 days' wages. And because of that, I can't just, oh, thanks God, I'll go on about my life. Can't do it. Can't do it. The other is something that happened several years ago, and I didn't used to talk about this in the talks. And I told them, I did a practice talk to one of my kids like 5, 6 years ago, and they said, you have to share this. So I do. There was a middle of the night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, something like that. I'm laying there kind of half asleep, half awake, you know. And I'm just laying there, and this eyes closed, this image just kind of comes in front of my eyes. I see myself standing at the edge of a canyon, which is infinitely bigger than the Grand Canyon. And in it are packed, it seemed like virtually all of humanity is just packed in there like sardines. Nobody can move. Everybody down there is engulfed in some type of sexual sin. Pornography, adultery, fornication, homosexuality, everything. They're just packed in. And they're feeling all this. And they all feel alone. This profound sense of emptiness and aloneness, even though they can't move. I'm standing at the edge of this canyon looking at this. And I can feel all of it because I've been there. Not too far previously, I was one of them. And then I noticed Jesus is standing at my side. He puts his hand on my shoulder, and he kind of motions down to all the people. He says, you know it doesn't have to be like this. I need you to tell them for me. And it just ended. I was awake then. I got up, went in the bathroom, I think I cried for an hour. I said, I don't know what to do with it. What am I supposed to do with this? But that's been the core motivating factor or motto or whatever you want to call it for Road to Purity and the decisions and what we do. We do programs, we do formation of a priest, we do seminarians, we do social media awareness, just all of this stuff. We tell them. So much right to the extent of, I have my notes here for the talk. The title of the talk, whatever, before the title, before the opening prayer, very top, it says, tell them for me. That's what I have on this at the moment. I'll take questions. And Don, are you available? If anybody wrote any questions down,